Okay, so Bitcoin, right. It's everywhere you look these days. Everyone's got an opinion on it, a prediction, some kind of hot take. But today we're going to try to cut through all that noise and bring you some actual insight. We're diving deep into Plan B and his Bitcoin predictions, especially this whole $1 million Bitcoin idea. So, are we like on the edge of a financial revolution, or is this all just hype? That's what we're looking at today.
Yeah, and we're going to unpack, like, does this guy's analysis, Plan B's analysis, actually hold water? And if it does, like, what would $1 million Bitcoin even mean for the average person?
Totally. We've got you covered, so you don't have to wade through all those articles yourself. Let's start with the core of Plan V's argument, this thing called the stock-to-flow model, S2F.
Basically, it's all about measuring scarcity. The idea is the scarcer something is, the more valuable it's going to be.
Right, like a rare comic book or something. Limited supply, high demand equals big price tag.
So Plan B is applying that same logic to Bitcoin.
Exactly. Only 21 million Bitcoins will ever exist. That limited supply, it's hard-coded in. And then on top of that, every 4 years, the rate that new Bitcoins are created, it gets cut in half. That's the halving everyone's talking about. Basically, Bitcoin is designed to get more scarce over time, which is totally different from traditional currencies. They can just print more whenever they want, right?
Okay, so that's the S2F model in theory, but it gets really interesting. Plan B's used this thing to make some scarily accurate predictions about Bitcoin's price before, like nailing the 2017 boom, and even that surge to $55,000 back in 2021.
Yeah, that's what makes people pay attention. If a model can predict the past that well, it makes you wonder, what can it tell us about the future for sure? Which brings us to the $1 million Bitcoin question, literally. If Plan B's right, what does that even mean for the world, economies, everyday people?
It's the question, right?
Yeah.
$1 million Bitcoin would be huge.
So let's get into it. First, we got to understand exactly how Plan B is using this S2F model to come up with these honestly kind of mind-blowing predictions and like why he thinks Bitcoin's journey is far from over.
So Plan B, he doesn't stop at just like Bitcoin's built-in scarcity. He looks at the adoption rate too.
Yeah.
Uses what's called an S-curve to show how he sees that playing out.
Okay, yeah, S-curves, I've heard of them, but how does that apply to Bitcoin specifically?
So picture like a gradual slope, right?
Yeah.
And then suddenly it spikes straight up before leveling off again. That's your S-curve. Shows how fast something gets adopted over time.
Oh, I'm with you.
At the bottom of the S, you've got those early adopters, flow growth, kind of a niche thing.
Yeah.
But then you hit that steep part, and boom, that's when things explode. Adoption goes crazy. Everything changes fast. Think about the internet. Started slow, then it hit that steep part of the curve, and it like reshaped the entire world, right?
Yeah.
Plan B thinks Bitcoin's on a similar path.
So where are we on that curve now with Bitcoin, according to him? Still climbing slowly, or are we about to hit that rocket ship growth?
He says we're somewhere in the early to mid stage of that rapid growth part. That's where those price predictions get really interesting. Because as more people use Bitcoin, that limited supply, it matters even more, pushes the price up.
All right, let's talk numbers. Plan B's predictions, they're making headlines. Lay it on us.
Okay, so he's saying Bitcoin could hit $100,000 by the end of next year, 2024.
Next.
And this is where that halving event in 2024 comes in. After that, he's predicting, get this, $500,000, maybe even more by 2025.
Those are some serious numbers. What about even further out?
He even suggests it could reach, get this, $1 million in the years after that.
$1 million per Bitcoin.
Yeah.
It's almost impossible to imagine. Okay, but back to the halving event in 2024. Why is that one event so important for these projections?
Remember, Bitcoin supply gets cut in half every 4 years, right? 2024, that's the next halving. The rate at which new Bitcoins are mined, it gets slashed in half. Makes the existing supply even more scarce. It's like, imagine if the supply of gold was suddenly cut in half. What happens to the price?
Price skyrockets.
Exactly. And Plan B's framework, it basically says this could have a massive impact on the price.
Supply and demand, but on a global scale.
Exactly. But look, even with his track record, some people aren't convinced. There's this whole argument about diminishing returns, saying Bitcoin's already seen crazy growth, so future gains won't be as big. What does Plan B say to that?
Right. Makes sense.
It's a valid point, but Plan B says those diminishing returns won't really be a factor until Bitcoin reaches something like 50% global adoption. We're nowhere near that right now. His analysis says until we hit that point, scarcity is still going to be the biggest thing driving the price.
So he's saying those who are bearish on Bitcoin, they're kind of missing the bigger picture.
Yeah, basically.
But just to play devil's advocate here, were there any counter-arguments to his whole framework that the research didn't really address?
You know, it's funny. A lot of the criticisms we found focused on how simple the stock-to-flow model is.
Mhm.
Some say it relies too much on scarcity and doesn't factor in things like government regulation, new cryptocurrencies popping up, that kind of stuff.
Sure.
They're saying it's not as simple as just supply and demand, which is fair.
It's always good to look at it from different angles. But even with those criticisms, even if someone doesn't totally buy into Plan B's predictions, understanding these ideas is still useful, right? For anyone trying to wrap their head around Bitcoin and all this cryptocurrency stuff.
Absolutely. It gives you a framework,
Hmm.
helps you understand what's really going on.
So we've got the model, the predictions, even some counter arguments. But let's just say, hypothetically, that Plan B's right on the money and Bitcoin actually gets to these crazy prices. What does that even look like? What does $1 million Bitcoin mean for the world? I mean, it's kind of hard to even wrap your head around, right? What happens when people are using a currency that's worth like $1 million a coin? What does that even look like?
Really makes you think differently about money. Some economists are even saying $1 million Bitcoin could completely change global finance.
Okay, so what does that even look like? Take me a picture. $1 million Bitcoin world.
Well, first off, it could totally change how we think about savings and investment. You know,
Yeah.
Bitcoin's limited supply, the fact that it's decentralized, it's really attractive to people looking for an alternative to like traditional currencies, especially in places with unstable economies.
Yeah, like a digital gold rush, but way bigger potentially.
Exactly. And if enough people adopt it, we could see Bitcoin being used for like everyday stuff, buying groceries. It could challenge the dollar even.
Yeah.
Imagine a world where you could send money anywhere instantly. Almost no fees, no banks involved. That's the kind of potential we're talking about with $1 million Bitcoin.
That's wild. International transfers, micropayments. The possibilities are huge. But wouldn't it change that big? Wouldn't that cause some instability too? What about market manipulation if Bitcoin gets that valuable?
Oh, for sure. Those are big questions. There are definitely risks that come with such a huge shift in like how the entire financial system works. Volatility is a big one.
Yeah.
We've already seen how much Bitcoin's price can swing, right? Imagine those swings with $1 million Bitcoin.
Talk about a roller coaster.
And then there's regulation. Governments are still trying to figure out this whole cryptocurrency thing. If Bitcoin actually starts to become a threat to the traditional financial systems, they're going to crack down more regulations for sure.
It's a lot to think about. Even if we don't know for sure what's going to happen, it's pretty fascinating to explore. But just strategically speaking, if Plan B is right about all this, does his research tell us anything about how to navigate this whole new financial world?
Well, first things first, we are not giving financial advice here.
Of course, of course.
Yeah. But it is interesting. Plan B actually have a whole trading strategy based on those halving cycles.
Right, buying 6 months before a halving event, selling 18 months after.
Exactly.
Yeah.
He's basing that on how the price has moved historically around those halvings, which, by the way, have usually been followed by like huge bull runs. Of course, past performance isn't a guarantee or anything, but it's definitely an interesting strategy.
Super interesting. Well, I think if there's one big takeaway from this whole deep dive, it's that $1 million Bitcoin might seem like something out of a movie, but the forces behind it, the technology, the ideas, it's all very real.
Totally. And whether it actually hits $1 million or not, honestly, just understanding these concepts, the fundamentals, it's so important for anyone who wants to understand the future of finance. Be a part of this conversation.
Absolutely. This has been a really insightful deep dive. Thanks to our expert for breaking it all down so clearly, and to you, our listener, for joining us. Remember, knowledge is power, especially in the world of Bitcoin. Keep exploring, keep learning, and we'll see you on the next deep dive.